Larry Summers, our regular contributor here on Wall Street Week, came with us to Davos to talk about some of the big issues on the agenda. And we started with him about that debt ceiling crisis back in the United States that is getting so much attention right here at the World Economic Forum.
This is potential tragedy as farce. It would be catastrophic and inconceivable for the United States to default. It's not what anybody serious does. We have problems in our family or discussions about how my kids spend money. Maybe my kids will pay off Visa, maybe I will pay off Visa, but the idea that the family should stiff Visa because we can't agree is absurd. Similarly, the debt limit. I've been through a lot of these. I think at the end of the day, we will meet our obligations and not cause substantial disruption. But God, I wish we could move past this, like Senator McConnell showed real leadership in doing some time ago, because it would be catastrophic for the United States and for our sense as a serious country if we were to actually default.
Another big story here in Davos, but more globally, actually, is now Liu He, the vice premier of China, meeting with Janet Yellen just over in Zurich, not far from here, in part because Liu He was here, as I understand it, in Davos, to at least start a discussion. What do you make of that?
I think it's encouraging. I had a chance to speak with him here in Davos. Look, I think it's always better to be talking. Whether you're agreeing, whether you're disagreeing, you get to better places with mutual understanding. And so I welcomed that. I think the right approach is small victories. We're not going to have a broad rapprochement or a transformation of the relationship. But if we have small victories, we identify areas of progress, we have specific accomplishments. I'd like to see that with respect to the debt problems and debt resolution of some of the poorest countries in the world. I'd like to see that with respect to climate finance in the developing world. I think we can make progress if we set our expectations and aspirations right towards small victories.
You're a macroeconomist. You're not a politician, as far as I know. At the same time, you know politics in Washington. Can we make even those small steps of progress on either side, with Liu He maintaining the support from President Xi and Janet Yellen maintaining support in the United States? Because there's a lot, as you know, of political sentiment against China.
I think if we're making concessions to China, probably not. If we're working with China to work out an African debt problem or to support an energy transition, then I think we can. I think we need to get out of the zero-sum mindset, and by focusing on the issues in third countries, I think we've got a much better chance of doing that. I think it'll be much harder on the direct commercial issues between our two countries.
Global Wall Street has all come here to Davos, and another topic of conversation is the economy overall, where we are on inflation and the likelihood of recession in the United States and, for that matter, around the world. You've been warning about the possibility of recession for some time, even saying it's more likely than not. At the same time, things have been getting a little better on some of the eco numbers. Where are you right now?
I'm still cautious, David, but with a little bit more hope than I had before. Soft landings are the triumph of hope over experience, but sometimes hope does triumph over experience. And we have seen some slowing of inflation indicators. At the same time, we've seen continued strength. And that's got to be what we all want to see. I still think it's going to be hard because we need a substantial amount of disinflation that goes beyond volatile components receding, but you have to recognize that the figures are better than somebody like me would have expected 3 months ago. So it's still a very, very difficult job for the Fed, but the situation does look a bit better.
Larry, the World Economic Forum was started 42 years ago, and its purpose was to try to help the globe. And goodness knows, I think right now, as we look around the globe, it could use a little bit of help. And it brought together business leaders, leaders of government, which you certainly have been, and also leading academics, which you are as well. Let's talk about the larger issues, perhaps, we should look at, some of which you have addressed before on Wall Street Week. Things like a global public good, preventing the next pandemic, worrying about the less fortunate countries around the world and how they may be being left behind.
As important as the geopolitical conflicts around Russia or between the United States and China are, we've got an agenda now that includes planetary security. That's with respect to pandemics, that's with respect to climate change, that's with respect to huge refugee flows, that's with respect to nuclear proliferation. And we've got to address that agenda, and we've got tools for doing it. The IMF, the World Bank, the United Nations, but we need some boldness and vision if we're going to get there in terms of doing it. That's something that President Biden has been very much behind, and I hope in his next 2 years as president, we're going to see some real vision for the international architecture and the international institutions coming from the United States, because I think there's vast potential to support a green transition in particular. Extraordinary things have happened with technology, but they're not going to be self-actualizing. It's going to need finance, it's going to need a push, it's going to need global collaboration. And I think that's an area where the United States can show some important leadership, but it's going to have to be willing to consult and listen and adapt to the ideas of others, including China. But with what's happening in technology, there is vast potential for human betterment in this moment. And I hope we can seize that opportunity.
I want to come back to inclusive growth, if I could, which is what a lot of people talk about. And let's talk about technology specifically. Technology has already improved the lives of many Americans and people around the world. I'm not sure it's always been pro-equality. I'm not sure everyone's been brought along with that. You could argue that sometimes it's had the reverse effect. It's made the rich richer and maybe the poor poorer. Looking at things like quantum computing, like open AI, artificial intelligence like that, is there a way at this stage we can take a look at that and say, let's make sure we bring along everyone? Because as you point out, Larry, it's not just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do economically to have more inclusive growth.
Nobody can know for sure. But I think the great thing about AI and some of this is that it has the potential to augment the capacity of people in doing their jobs rather than to replace people doing their jobs. There are going to be all kinds of tasks which still require humans to do them, but I think people are going to be able to do them much more effectively. Think, for example, of a small technology, the spell checker, and the way in which that's augmented the ability of a large number of people and made them more productive because they're able to write things and produce letters and produce documents in a way that was much harder for them before. And I think we have to think about how to make technology like that spell checker on a grand scale. And I'm guardedly optimistic that that's something that's going to be possible. There's headlines now almost a century ago in the New York Times in 1928 about how mechanization and automation were going to take away jobs from all the people. There's stories like that. And President Johnson had a commission that was exactly about all of that. And yet we kept making progress. And I'm optimistic that there's that possibility in the future.